Welcome to Horror Echo. Hello everyone. I'm here to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. But before you do, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know in the comments where you're from and what time it is where you're watching. Now, get comfortable, relax, and let me take you on a journey into the unknown. It was a quiet evening in the small town of Greendale, nestled on the edge of the Appalachian Mountains. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting a silvery glow across the mist-covered fields. As night crept in, the air grew heavier, thick with the scent of rain and something else, something old, something ancient. Erin stood by the window of her bedroom, staring out into the vast, empty expanse. Her family had moved to this house a month ago, seeking a fresh start after the loss of her father. But ever since they arrived, something didn't feel right. The house was too quiet, too still. It was as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. "Erin, honey, are you ready for bed?" her mother called from downstairs. Erin didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the tree at the far end of the yard, just beyond the boundary of the garden. It was an old tree, twisted and gnarled, its branches clawing at the sky like the fingers of a skeletal hand. The shadows beneath it seemed to move, shift, or was it just the wind? Her heartbeat quickened. It had started a few nights ago, whispers. Soft, barely audible at first, but each night they grew louder, more insistent. At first, Erin thought it was just her imagination, the sounds of the house settling. But then she heard it again tonight, as she was drifting off to sleep, a voice, hushed and cold. "Hello." It was clear now, unmistakable, coming from the direction of the tree. Erin's mind raced. She had tried to ignore it, to convince herself it was just the wind or perhaps some animal rustling in the underbrush. But the whispering didn't stop. Every night, it returned, and tonight, it seemed more menacing than ever. She felt a shiver run down her spine. Her eyes remained locked on the tree, her breath caught in her throat. The wind howled outside, but she could still hear it. The faint, eerie whisper calling her name. "Erin." It was the voice again, unmistakably real now. Erin's hands gripped the windowsill as she leaned forward, peering into the gloom. The tree was still, its branches now mere silhouettes against the moonlit sky. But then something caught her eye. Something was there, in the shadows, just beyond the tree's reach. A figure, hunched and unnaturally still, sitting on the lowest branch, its face obscured by darkness. It was too far to make out clearly, but Erin knew instinctively that it was watching her. She could feel its gaze, cold and penetrating, like ice seeping into her bones. Her breath quickened. Was it real? Or was it just another trick of her mind, worn down by grief and isolation? No, it couldn't be. She was certain she wasn't imagining it. There was something out there. "Mom!" Erin screamed, her voice high with panic. "There's someone outside." Her mother's footsteps echoed from below. The door to her room flew open, and her mother rushed in, her face concerned. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "Outside, by the tree, there's someone there." Erin gasped, pointing toward the window. But when her mother looked, the yard was empty, nothing but the shifting shadows of the tree and the surrounding grass. "Erin," her mother said softly, her voice calm yet filled with an undertone of something more. "There's no one there, honey. You must have imagined it." But Erin knew she hadn't. The whispers, those horrible whispers, were growing louder now, louder than ever before. and with them, a creeping dread began to settle over her, like the fog rolling in from the mountains. She turned back to the window, and that's when she saw it again. The figure was still there, perched on the branch of the tree. Its face was now visible, pale and gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to stare directly at her. Its mouth stretched into a thin, cruel smile. "Hello, Aaron," the whisper echoed again, though it wasn't from outside the window. It was inside her head. A voice that wasn't hers, a voice that felt ancient, like it had been waiting for centuries to speak. She stumbled backward, her heart racing. Her mother didn't see it. She didn't hear it. Aaron was alone in this, alone with the thing in the tree. But she wasn't alone for long. The whispering voice became louder, more urgent, and suddenly, there was a rustling at the foot of her bed. Erin spun around, and her eyes went wide as the shadows in the corner of her room began to shift. It was as if the darkness itself was alive, moving toward her, coalescing into the form of a figure, a pale silhouette standing in the corner. It was the same figure she had seen outside, the same twisted, unnatural form. But this time, its face was fully revealed, and Erin's blood ran cold. The thing's face was no longer just pale and gaunt. Its eyes were wide, unblinking, and black as coal. Its mouth opened, revealing teeth that were far too sharp for any human to possess. The thing grinned. "Erin," it whispered, the words slithering into her ears like venom. "I've been waiting for you." Chapter 2, The Haunting Intensifies. Erin's breath hitched in her throat as the figure in the corner of her room stepped forward. Its limbs were too long, too thin, like a puppet whose strings had been pulled too tight. Every movement it made sent chills down her spine, as though the air itself recoiled in horror at its presence. It spoke again, the voice still soft but unmistakably dark. "I've been waiting for you, Erin. I've been waiting so long." Her mother stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the space where the figure had materialized. She could see nothing, hear nothing. But Erin was certain this thing, whatever it was real. "Mom!" Erin shouted, her voice trembling with terror. "Please, can't you see it? It's right there." Her mother shook her head, trying to mask the concern that crept into her eyes. "Erin, you're just imagining things. You've been through a lot lately. Maybe it's just the stress from the move, and everything that's happened." But Erin could barely hear her over the rushing sound of her own heartbeat, thumping in her ears like the beat of a war drum. She couldn't take her eyes off the figure, whose grin grew wider with every passing second. The thing in the corner tilted its head to one side, its black eyes gleaming with something almost playful. "You think it's all in your head, don't you?" It let out a low, guttural laugh, a sound so unnatural that it sent a wave of nausea through Erin's body. "Oh, Erin, it's only just begun." With a sudden, jerky movement, the figure leaped from the corner of the room, its long fingers scraping against the wall as it shot forward. Erin screamed, stumbling backward, her legs knocking into the bed as she tried to put distance between herself and the thing. But it was too fast, too close. It was right in front of her, its cold breath brushing against her face. The thing's mouth opened wider, revealing rows of jagged teeth that seemed to stretch impossibly far. It leaned in, its putrid scent filling her nostrils, and whispered in a voice that sounded both terrifying and familiar. "I told you, Erin. I've been waiting for you." A flash of memory hit Erin like a lightning bolt. The whispers she'd heard before. The feeling of being watched. This thing, whatever it was, had been here long before she even stepped foot in this house. It had been following her, waiting for the right moment to make its presence known. "Mom!" Erin screamed again, but her mother was still standing by the door, unable to see what was happening. Desperately, Erin grabbed her mother's arm, pulling her into the room. "Mom, you have to listen. It's real. It's right here." Her mother, clearly shaken but unwilling to believe her daughter, yanked her arm away. "Erin, stop. You need to calm down." The figure seemed to take pleasure in the confusion, its wicked grin widening as Erin continued to struggle. She was so close to breaking, so close to losing her grip on reality. But in that moment, something changed. The whispers grew louder, more frantic. Erin could feel the temperature drop in the room, a biting cold that numbed her skin. The figure's laughter stopped, and it became still. Its eyes locked onto Erin's with an intensity that pierced through her soul. Suddenly, without warning, the figure vanished. One moment it was there, looming over her, and the next it was gone. The room fell silent, the air thick with an unshakable sense of dread. "Erin," her mother said softly, her voice filled with concern but tinged with disbelief. "There's nothing here. You're just having a nightmare. Let's get you to bed." But Erin couldn't move. She could still feel the presence of the thing, its eyes burning into her from some unseen place. She knew it wasn't gone. She knew it would come back. And next time, it wouldn't leave so easily. Chapter 3: The Return of the Whisper. The following days were a blur. Erin tried to return to normal, to pretend that the events of that night were just a bad dream. But the whispers never stopped. They followed her wherever she went, just out of reach, just enough to make her question her sanity. The figure, whatever it was, seemed to haunt every corner of the house, waiting, watching, lurking in the shadows. She couldn't shake the feeling that it was always there, just beyond her sight, its cold eyes trained on her every moment. It wasn't long before Erin began to lose sleep. The whispers became louder, clearer, until they were no longer just voices in the dark. They were words, real words that seemed to come from every direction. "Hello? Erin? Do you remember me?" Erin would find herself staring into the darkness for hours, waiting for the figure to appear again, to reveal itself fully. But no matter how hard she looked, it remained elusive, just out of her grasp. One evening, she was sitting alone in her room, the air thick with silence. The house was unusually quiet, too quiet. Even the usual creaks and groans of the old house seemed to have stopped. Erin's heart raced as the whispers began once more, this time closer than ever before. "Erin, it's time." She froze. The voice was unmistakable. It was the same voice, the same whisper, the same cold promise. But this time, Erin didn't run. She didn't scream. She was tired of running, tired of pretending everything was fine. She needed answers. With trembling hands, she grabbed a flashlight and made her way downstairs, her footsteps echoing in the stillness of the house. The whispers were louder now, urging her on. She could feel the presence of the thing, could almost sense it, like a shadow following her every move. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, the whispering stopped. A deafening silence filled the house, and for a moment, Erin thought she had imagined it all. But then, she saw it. In the center of the living room, the same figure stood, its twisted form illuminated by the weak light of the flashlight. Its face was more distinct now, its hollow eyes staring directly at her with an intensity that froze her in place. Chapter 4: The Dark Revelation. Erin's heart pounded against her chest as she stood frozen in the living room, the beam of the flashlight trembling in her hand. The figure in front of her was no longer a shadow, no longer a fleeting nightmare. It was real, solid, and closer than ever. The air grew thicker, suffocating, as the whispers turned into words, low and guttural, clawing at her mind. "I've been waiting for you, Erin," the thing repeated, its voice sending shivers down her spine. Her legs felt heavy, as though they were sinking into the floor. Every instinct in her body screamed to run, to flee to the safety of her room, but she couldn't move. Her feet were rooted to the spot, her body frozen under the unrelenting gaze of the figure. Its hollow eyes bore into her like twin black holes, sucking the warmth from the room, leaving nothing but cold and darkness in their wake. "Why? Why me?" Erin finally managed to choke out, her voice barely a whisper. Her throat felt tight, as if the words were being forced out of her, but she had to know. She needed to understand what this thing wanted, why it had been following her. The figure didn't answer immediately. It simply stood there, its twisted form outlined against the dim light of the living room. The room seemed to grow colder with each passing second, as though the very air was being sucked into the abyss of its eyes. The darkness behind it seemed to grow, as if the shadows themselves were alive, creeping along the walls, inching toward Erin. Then, the figure spoke, its voice sending a chill through her bones, as if it had emerged from the depths of the earth itself. "You don't remember, do you, Erin?" Her breath caught in her throat. The voice was deeper now, almost like a growl, its words thick with malice and something else, something ancient. Erin shook her head. "Remember what? Who are you?" The thing smiled. Or at least, it seemed to smile. Its mouth stretched unnaturally wide, revealing jagged teeth that glinted in the dim light. "You were never meant to leave, Erin. Not after that night." A sudden memory flickered in Erin's mind, a memory she had buried so deep that she had almost forgotten it. A memory of a stormy night, years ago, when she was just a child. Her father had taken her to the woods, to a place near the edge of the mountains. It had been late, too late, and the wind had howled through the trees like something alive. She remembered her father's voice, urgent and tense, as he hurried her along, telling her that they needed to leave, that it wasn't safe. But she had never asked why. Now, she understood. "You came too close, Erin," the figure continued, its voice dripping with dark amusement. "Too close to the truth. Too close to the heart of it all." Erin took a step back, her mind racing as she tried to piece the fragments of memory together. The figure's words didn't make sense, not fully, but she felt something shift inside her, a deep, gnawing sense of dread that had been buried for years. She had pushed it all away, tried to forget, but now it was all coming back to her. The thing's eyes gleamed, sensing her realization. "You remember now, don't you? Your father knew. He knew what was waiting, what would follow. But you were just a child. You didn't understand." Her father. The memories flooded back in waves now. The old house they had lived in, far away from the town. The strange happenings. The feeling of being watched. And the night her father had taken her away, never to return. Erin's legs shook as she took another step back, her heart hammering in her chest. You were with him, weren't you? You were the thing he was running from. The figure tilted its head, its grin widening. I was always here, Aaron, waiting for the right moment to claim what was mine. The room seemed to close in around her, the walls pressing against her as the shadows grew longer, darker, more oppressive. She could feel the presence of the thing, its malevolent energy seeping into her skin, into her bones. But why me? Aaron whispered, her voice cracking. What do you want from me? The figure stepped forward, its long fingers outstretched, brushing the air as though savoring the fear that radiated from her. You are the key, Aaron. The bloodline, the vessel. You are the one who can unlock what has been hidden for so long. The truth. The darkness. The room spun as Aaron struggled to process what the figure was saying. Bloodline? Vessel? What was it talking about? But deep down, she felt a chilling certainty that whatever the truth was, it was something far worse than she could ever imagine. You see, Aaron, the figure continued, its voice softer now, like a whisper in her ear. Your father was the one who locked it away. The truth. The power. The thing that should never have been. Aaron's breath quickened. The words didn't make sense, but she could feel the weight of them, the heaviness of the truth that was about to be revealed. Locked away? What do you mean? The figure's smile faltered, its eyes narrowing. Your father's mistake. His final act. He thought he could protect you, that he could keep you safe. But the door is open now, Aaron. And you are the one who will unlock it completely. A cold wave of realization crashed over her. No, she whispered, shaking her head. I won't let you. The thing laughed, a sound that echoed through the empty house like a death knell. You have no choice, Aaron. You never did. It's already started. Aaron stumbled backward, her mind reeling. The whispers had been building, growing louder and clearer. The thing had been here all along, waiting for her. She was the key. She was the one who could unlock whatever dark force had been hidden for so long. But she couldn't let it happen. She wouldn't. With a desperate cry, Aaron turned and ran, the cold shadows reaching for her, the figure's laughter chasing her every step. She sprinted toward the door, but as she reached the threshold, something cold and invisible slammed into her chest, knocking the wind out of her. She collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. The figure appeared before her, its twisted face inches from hers. It's too late, it whispered. You can't escape. You're already ours. The darkness around her closed in, suffocating, consuming. Aaron's vision blurred as she struggled to stay conscious, her mind fighting against the overwhelming pull of the shadows. But it was no use. The thing was too strong, too powerful. And then, just as the last remnants of her strength began to fade, Aaron heard it, the whispers, growing louder, more frantic, until they filled her entire mind. The door had been opened, and now there was no turning back. I've been waiting for you, Aaron, the figure said, its voice low and deadly. The room seemed to warp around her, the shadows stretching and twisting like they were alive, closing in on her. Aaron knew there was no escape. The thing had found her, and now it was time for her to face the truth. Thank you for listening to today's story. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Horror Echo. Let us know if you've ever had a similar experience. We'd love to hear your story. Sweet dreams, if you can sleep.